AN-94 Abakan, the unorthodox Soviet rifle with a two-round hyperburst. When we think of Soviet and Russian small arms, certain iconic designs immediately come to mind. The Mosin Nagant, the PPSH-41, the SKS, and of course the ubiquitous AK-47 and its descendants. All of these weapons share common DNA: ruggedness, simplicity, and ease of production. Yet, in the late Cold War and immediate post-Soviet period, Russian engineers dared to step away from their conservative design philosophy to pursue something radically different. The result was the AN-94 Abakan, a weapon that stands as one of the strangest assault rifles ever adopted by a modern military. At first glance, the AN-94 looks somewhat like a stretched, modernized Kalashnikov derivative: polymer furniture, a side-folding stock, a magazine inserted below the receiver, and a gas piston system. These are familiar features, but beneath its surface lies a mechanical system so unusual that even seasoned firearms experts often need diagrams to understand how it actually works. The AN-94's claim to fame is its hyperburst capability, the ability to fire a two-round burst at an astonishing 1,800 rounds per minute before immediately slowing down to a standard automatic rate of about 600 rounds per minute. In practice, this means that the shooter can deliver two bullets into a target so quickly, within 50 milliseconds, that recoil has not yet had time to shift the rifle's aim point. Effectively, the weapon stacks two rounds almost into the same hole, greatly increasing lethality and armor penetration. This feature alone makes the AN-94 one of the most ambitious small arms experiments of the 20th century. But to understand its significance, we must look at the broader historical and military context that led to its creation. Origins of the Abakan program. During the 1970s and 1980s, the Soviet Union faced a difficult reality. While the AK-74, chambered in 5.45 x 39 millimeters, was rugged and reliable, Western nations were investing heavily in new small arms technologies that promised greater accuracy, penetration, and adaptability. The U.S. military was refining its M16 platform and experimenting with advanced optics, while NATO research into caseless ammunition and burst fire systems hinted at a possible technological leap. The Soviet military leadership, particularly the Ministry of Defense and the Main Missile and Artillery Directorate, GRAU, initiated a program known as Abakan in 1978. The goal was ambitious: to replace the AK-74 with a next-generation assault rifle that would significantly improve accuracy and effectiveness, particularly in the critical first shots of an engagement. Soviet doctrine emphasized the idea that most firefights are decided in the first seconds. Whoever can deliver accurate, lethal fire first usually wins. Thus, the Abakan trial sought a weapon that could maximize the probability of hitting a target with the initial burst. Dozens of prototypes were submitted by legendary design bureaus across the USSR. These included derivatives from Kalashnikov's team, Nikhanov's innovative designs, and even experimental weapons with electronic firing systems. After years of testing, the winner was Gennady Nikhanov's design, which would eventually be standardized in 1994 as the AN-94, Automat Nikhanova Model 1994. The bizarre mechanism. What sets the AN-94 apart from any other rifle in the world is its blowback-shifted pulse system, a mouthful of engineering jargon that reflects the weapon's mechanical eccentricity. Unlike a traditional Kalashnikov, in which the bolt carrier group moves directly back and forth during cycling, the AN-94 employs a delayed recoil transmission system. Here's how it works in simplified terms. When the trigger is pulled, the first cartridge is fired in a locked bolt position. Instead of the entire bolt group slamming backward immediately, the AN-94 uses a pulley and cable system to temporarily isolate the shooter from the recoil impulse. During this micro-delay, the weapon is able to chamber and fire a second round at blistering speed, 1,800 rounds per minute equivalent, before the shooter even feels the recoil of the first shot. Only after the second round is launched does the full bolt carrier group move rearward, transmitting recoil to the shooter and settling into a slower 600 rounds per minute cycle. The result is that the first two rounds are delivered in a near instantaneous double tap, achieving grouping tighter than any human could achieve manually. In trials, this gave the Soviet soldiers a significant advantage in the probability of hitting a target, especially when engaging opponents wearing body armor. However, this clever system came at a price: extreme mechanical complexity. The pulley, cable, and multi-stage firing cycle made the AN-94 much harder to maintain in the field compared to the robust, farmer-proof AK-47. Soldiers quickly nicknamed it Abakan, sometimes spoken with equal parts awe and frustration. Performance in the field. On paper, the AN-94's two-round hyperburst was revolutionary. In tests, it demonstrated almost double the hit probability compared to the AK-74 during the first moments of an engagement. In close quarters or against fleeting targets, this gave soldiers an undeniable edge. Furthermore, the weapon retained the option of traditional, semi-automatic, and fully automatic fire. In practice, however, the rifle's advantages were offset by several drawbacks. Weight and balance. At 3.85 kilograms empty, the AN-94 was heavier than the AK-74. The cable-driven mechanism also altered the rifle's center of gravity. Complexity. Field stripping was notoriously difficult. While an AK can be disassembled blindfolded, the AN-94 required careful handling of springs, pulleys, and multiple moving parts. Training burden. Soldiers needed significantly more time to master the rifle. The two-round burst was useful only if the shooter understood when and how to employ it effectively. Cost. Production was far more expensive than the AK series at a time when the cash-strapped Russian Federation of the 1990s could barely afford to modernize its forces. As a result, the AN-94 never fully replaced the AK-74. Instead, it was issued selectively to elite units, paratroopers, special forces, and certain police formations. For the average Russian conscript, the tried-and-true AK remained the standard. Comparison with Western designs. From the perspective of a U.S. weapons expert, the AN-94 is fascinating because it represents a rare moment when Soviet design diverged sharply from its usual philosophy. Historically, Soviet arms favored simplicity, durability, and mass production. The AK-47 became legendary not because it was the most accurate rifle, but because it worked in mud, sand, and snow without complaint. By contrast, the AN-94 resembles certain Western attempts to push the boundaries of small arms technology. In particular, it recalls the Heckler & Koch G11, a German rifle that used caseless ammunition and a rotating chamber to achieve hyperburst fire at 2,100 rounds per minute. Both weapons pursued the same tactical idea: deliver multiple rounds before recoil disturbs the sight picture. The difference is that while the G11 was abandoned due to complexity and cost, the AN-94 actually entered limited service. When compared to American rifles, the AN-94's two-round burst is far more sophisticated than the M16's A2 burst mechanism, which is essentially a simple mechanical limiter. The M16's burst mode slows the cyclic rate and is intended to conserve ammunition, not to increase lethality. The AN-94, by contrast, was laser-focused on maximizing first-shot effectiveness. Tactical philosophy behind the Abakan. Why would the Soviets pursue such a radical design in the first place? The answer lies in the evolution of battlefield dynamics during the late 20th century. Body armor was becoming more widespread, making it harder for single, small-caliber rounds to incapacitate an opponent. Soviet analysts calculated that delivering two rounds into the same spot in under 100 milliseconds would dramatically increase the chance of penetrating armor and stopping the enemy before they could react. This reflects a very different philosophy from the American volume of fire approach. While American forces often relied on suppressive firepower and combined arms tactics, the Soviet concept of the Abakan was about front-loading lethality, making sure the very first trigger pull had the highest possible chance of neutralizing a target. Legacy and fate of the AN-94. Today, the AN-94 occupies a curious place in firearms history. It was officially adopted in 1997, but never saw widespread distribution. A few thousand were produced, and they remain in service with some Russian special units. However, most of the Russian army continues to use modernized AK-74 variants or the newer AK-12. The reasons are clear. The AN-94 was too expensive, too complicated, and too maintenance-intensive for mass conscription forces. In many ways, it was a rifle ahead of its time, embodying a level of mechanical sophistication that clashed with the economic and logistical realities of post-Soviet Russia. Yet, from a technological standpoint, it remains one of the most fascinating assault rifles ever built. It demonstrated that even within the conservative Soviet design tradition, there was room for daring innovation. The AN-94 is a reminder that weapons engineering is as much about doctrine